all-inclusive vacations make life easy with endless eats, bottomless drinks, and never-ending fun. So booking an all-inclusive vacation should be easy too, right? That's where Apple Vacations comes in. Book your all-inclusive getaway with Apple Vacations and receive exclusive perks at select resorts. You'll find the best deals to Hyatt, Zilara, Riviera Maya in Mexico and enjoy a selection of exclusive nonstop vacation flights. Turn on easy mode at applevacations.com or call your local travel advisor to get started. Visit applevacations.com or call your local travel advisor to get started.
Hi, it's Gabby Reese, and this podcast is powered by Laird Superfood. It was created in our kitchen by my husband, big wave surfer Laird Hamilton, and it all started with a simple idea. What began as Laird's secret for long-lasting energy on the waves is now Laird Superfood, offering a full range of delicious plant-based creamers, coffee, greens, and more. Visit lairdsuperfood.com and use the code GABBY2024 and save 20% on your first order.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Her Playbook, brought to you by CCNY, doing remarkable things. Learn more at ccny.cuny.edu. My name is Madeline Burke, and joined this week is the Vice President of Game Operations from the NFL, Stephanie Durante. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
It's such a treat to have you here in studio. You do a lot of work with the league office, and I want you to explain, first of all, for our viewers and listeners out there who aren't quite sure what game operations means, what does your job entail?
So it's definitely a loaded question, because it is a broad sort of scope. At its core, our role is to support all 32 clubs and ensure that competitive equity and integrity is upheld across the board. That's a very broad sort of way to describe it. We do that through policy compliance, education, training with all of our member clubs. We have a game operations manual that is basically our foundational Bible, if you will, that we use to sort of set the ground rules for all teams. So that includes everything from what the visiting team can do the day before the game in the stadium. It regulates pretty much everything that has to take place on game day, sets minimum standards, tells the home team what they have to provide, again, with the underlying principles of competitive equity and integrity of the game. So it covers kind of a vast set of policies that sort of touch both internal stakeholders and club stakeholders from many departments. We primarily work with broadcasting, PR, officiating, security, events on our internal side, football technology and IT. And then on the club side, we work really closely with stadium operations, equipment managers, field managers, football operations, team travel, game presentation, and others. And so every policy that's in there sort of touches somebody in that space and sort of regulates what can or can't take place on game day. So that's sort of, that's our basis for everything that we do.
Right.
And then we're responsible for support on game day. So we have both a football ops rep program that we run through our department, where we send somebody to every single game from the preseason, regular season, and postseason. We'll have at least one representative there, eyes, ears, boots on the ground, communication liaison, feeding us information. And then we also operate what we call our GDOC, which is our Game Day Operations Center. It's based in our New York office. We're in a conference room with 14 TVs, 12 TVs. I can't remember because we keep
every game
modifying and upgrading. But that's sort of our centralized pulse point on game day, working really closely with officiating in the Art McNally Game Day Central, and Troy, Vincent, and team up in what they call mission control. So those are sort of our three centers of gravity on game day. We're focused on all things that are not playing rules specific and more all of the operational elements around that.
And logistics and stuff like that. I mean, yours sounds like a bit of a mission control too setup right there
for
as
sure,
well.
yes.
And like, eyes and ears on everything. And, I'd imagine just in a regular season that's, there's a lot that goes into this. But in a season like the one that we just had, like you look at the snowstorm in Buffalo and the team has to play their game in Detroit. What's that process like of finding another venue and pulling it together, especially the week of a game?
Yep. So for us, we actually sort of have a weather service provider that we work with on a regular basis. And we are monitoring weather for everything. So not just major weather events like a blizzard or a hurricane, but also just, throughout the week leading up to game day and on game day to make determinations about tarping fields and things like that.
Yeah.
But then when it rises to the level of something like a blizzard, we have our contingency planning process. And so what we do throughout the season, it's sort of an ongoing process. We work with all of our stadiums to basically get their event schedule, see what availability they have, and we put them on hold, 3 to 4 stadiums per week on hold about 10 days out to say, if we were to relocate a game, we are identifying these stadiums as our potential relocation sites so that they don't book any events. And so each week of the season, we have a number of stadiums that are on hold and available for us should we need to go somewhere else.
Okay.
So we are sort of working really closely with the potential host stadiums, but also the affected clubs on what does that look like for them? What's the timing for the decision? What's the impact? And public safety and, the area that's potentially impacted, always sort of making sure that we're not taking resources away from them just to host a football game.
Right. Absolutely. Because there's a lot that goes into it. It's like having an emergency goalie essentially right there and having not just the stadium, but the appropriate hotels and all that kind of stuff as well. With not just weather, though. I mean, this season, too, we had a unique experience with Damar Hamlin going down on Monday Night Football. And you guys had to rework a lot of potential if this, then that scenarios. I'd imagine that must have been a process.
That for sure was a process. I think that was probably something that we've talked about, in the what happens in a worst case scenario and, making sure that we have, the ability to make the right determination. We have a section in our game ops manual called the Emergency and Unfair Acts, and it goes through what the authority of the referee is during the game, but then also the authority of the commissioner, which talks through a suspension or a termination of the game, a cancellation of a game, a postponement of a game, a relocation of a game. And so what those options might be. And so, for something like that, that obviously rises to the level of our executive leadership team versus just specifically a game operations decision.
Yeah.
And it's always the authority of the commissioner to make that determination. But that was definitely one of the most extreme situations that I've dealt with in the last 15 years for sure.
I can imagine. And just all the logistics that come into play. What a unique job this is, and for somebody, you've been in the league office for 16 years now?
So I completed my 16th season. It'll be 16 full years in June.
That's incredible. What a journey. How did you start on this path? How did you decide the NFL is a place that you wanted to bring your talents?
So I will say this, I started at a very young age in this office. Well, not this one, at the stadium. But so my mother and my aunt both actually have worked at the Giants for quite some time. Mm-hmm. So I sort of, was always around this business. My aunt works in the scouting department. And so I remember I was probably 12 years old and trying to do anything I could. So I was helping alphabetize scouting reports and reading the scouting reports and just sort of, not really understanding exactly what that was at the time, but, enjoyed being around it. And then I actually stuffed season tickets when I was starting at 14 years old, where I spent pretty much 2 weeks of the summer sitting in a windowless room with a bunch of people some people I still talk to this day, literally taking a list of season ticket holders and a stack of tickets and making sure that they were getting their season tickets. And then I was a certified safe sitter when I turned 16.
Wow.
And started doing childcare on game day. Mm-hmm. And then followed that with interning in the ticket office. So I did that for a couple of summers in college. Mm-hmm. And then graduating college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was a marketing major.
Yeah.
And so I actually I applied for a couple of jobs within the NFL just as I didn't want to necessarily just follow, in my mom's footsteps and come work at the Giants. Yeah. Not saying there was an opportunity there anyway, but wanted to do something a little bit different. I studied abroad in Rome my junior year of college, loved it. Recommend that for anyone.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed my time there. NFL Europe was still active at that time. So I was like, oh, what a great way to pair like football and my love for traveling. So I was like, I should do that. There was nothing available and open. I applied for a job in the player development department. I didn't get it. And then the HR department reached out and said there was an assistant in game operations available. Did I want to apply for it? To which I said to my mom, I don't know what game operations is. And she was like, who cares? It's a job.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fine. And I applied for the job. And honestly, like for me, thinking back, I was so young. I was 22 years old. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It was the best entry-level job that I could have asked for. The people that I worked with at the time were amazing. It was like a small family, and it kind of allowed me to sort of learn and understand at the base level, and really just sort of learn and understand more about operations. And I kind of learned that I really do enjoy it and like it.
Yeah.
My first boss was Tim Davey, who, if anyone sees me on a Zoom call, you will see his jersey behind me. He passed away, and he had worked for the Jets before he came to the NFL. So I have a Jets jersey hanging in my on my wall. And ever since we started doing Zoom calls, everyone's like, why is there a Jets jersey on your wall? And I'm like, I support all 32 equally.
Right.
This is my former boss.
Right.
But when I started, he was the director of game operations, and he did not have a computer at the time. So I quite literally did everything for him.
Wow.
But in doing so, I learned so much and so fast.
I can imagine. Yeah. Well, and your path too, I mean, just growing up around it and just seeing so many different avenues in which one can work in football and sport in all of this. And I think that's one of the reasons too that we, put this podcast on, is to remind people that there are so many different avenues and so many different ways to work around football, work around the sport that people know and love. And especially for women too. There, when you looked around and you saw, your aunt in the scouting department, you saw your mother in this organization, you see a lot of women in these positions that you're like, that's something that would be possible for me too. I mean, how important was that representation for you growing up?
I think it was important. I do very specifically remember looking down the offices and seeing all of the men in the office and all of the women outside the cubicle. And looking back, you realize all of those people were running it. Like they were the ones doing everything. They truly weren't just administrative assistants. They really were kind of paving the way for others, I think, truly. So, but yeah, I think for sure, like being around this and really it was the female role models for me that were working in this industry. So it wasn't always like a thing in my mind necessarily that it would be odd or different for a woman to work in this field.
Yeah, because you're like, see, everything is possible. And being around it so much and growing up with it. I just still love the fact that you were like, what is game ops? And now 16 years later, you're the VP of the department. And you're like, I figured it out.
Yes.
Obviously more than figured it out. But when you look at, the department as a whole and how much you've grown in this part of the career. I mean, you mentioned your love for travel, a lot of it domestically, I can imagine, but with the NFL expanding internationally so much too, that's kind of a great way to tie it all in.
Yeah. So this year we had our first game in Munich, Germany.
Right.
And that was a really good experience. It was we've been doing the London game since 2007. And so that one's pretty well established. So it was fun to work on a new project going into a new market. There are cultural differences, but they were so excited to have a game there. I mean, the energy was amazing. There was a lot of work we had to do. We had to retrofit a lot of things in the stadium to make it work because it was a soccer stadium. But it was a fun project to work on, felt rewarding. The teams were excited. I think they enjoyed their time there. I think continuing into new markets is exciting. And again, like things are always evolving and changing. And that's what keeps our role and our job fresh and new and different. And, adds, places where you can sort of grow and develop and sort of get involved in other things. So,
yeah, I mean, that's got to be so cool though. You mentioned too, like just the international element and the cultural differences and stuff like that. You mentioned how London is such a well-oiled machine, but then going into Germany, what was the biggest not hurdle, but like difference in that planning process? What's the most memorable part of putting that together for you?
One of the things that there was a lot of differences, one of which was it was a soccer stadium first and foremost. So we had to basically extend the field and make it regulation length for us. Again, game operations policy tells you that you have to have 15 feet from the inbounds line in the back of the end zone to the field wall, and there has to be field wall padding. So working with the stadium, our international team, the stadium operations folks on what that plan would look like to make sure that, we didn't have a ton of time for planning this one, but making sure that we had all of the steps and the right pieces in place to make sure that took place and was ready to go for game day.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be cool too, and just kind of interacting with a lot of the people over there and traveling abroad and all that. What is your favorite, when you look back at your time so far with the NFL, is there a moment that you feel like, wow, this is why I do it? Is there something that you think sticks out of like this memory of what I have done in this league has been part of the reason that I do this show?
I think likely I would say my most special memory is there's probably a couple, and I'll probably there's been a lot over the years.
I can imagine.
But working Super Bowl, our responsibility is we have a team of people that support the participating team operations. We don't know who the teams are going to be, so our department takes on in partnership with the events team, takes on the planning for everything for Super Bowl. So practice, site location, selection, and outfitting that in preparation for the game. The team hotel selection, their friends and family hotel selection, stadium operations. We go into the stadium and we take a look at it from our perspective where we're trying to have, to make sure that this is a neutral site game, and we're balancing out sort of all of these pieces to give a truly equitable experience for both teams.
Yeah.
And so, we plan for 18 months, 2 years, whatever the runway is for those games. And, and then we kind of pass off the operational plans to the two participating teams, and then we kind of support them throughout the process. And I think, one of the more rewarding experiences is, sort of seeing that team that won and how excited they are and that energy and feeling like, it's a small part. That's not why they won, but it's a small part in making their experience as seamless as possible, as, as close to a regular road game for them as possible. And so I feel like that's fairly rewarding. The other memory for me that is somewhat rewarding and also kind of, it was the COVID experience.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the most challenging times in my career. The demands of the job were different. But the directive was clear, right? We were playing football. And that was, very clear was we're playing football. It's going to be on television. And, so that was really like the priority, plain and simple.
Yeah.
And there was a core group of people that were just working nonstop. And so that season, towards the end of that season was pretty rewarding because I don't think many people thought we were going to make it through.
Well, and it's so unique too, because I remember going through that process and being at the stadium when it was just empty. It was such a unique experience, but then watching it on TV and seeing the way that it unfolded and still having that fan experience available to people who were at home or, it was a tough time for everyone then. And being able to bring joy, because so often, people come together through sport, when things are rough and it's like, well, at least we've got, my team is doing well and I can support them on Sundays. And, week in and week out, that's just got to be such, a grind, but also having that light of like, this is why we're doing it for these fans, for this, and seeing it translate so well. Did it translate better than you expected it to?
I think that it was so unprecedented that like when we were first having conversations, like I couldn't even fathom what that would be, what it would look like. Right. And, people came together and made it work. And that, made you feel like you were a part of something.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Yeah. So lots of stuff going into this role of yours with the NFL. But, as growing up in the world of sport, did you play sports growing up?
I did. So I did gymnastics when I was basically from 5 to 12.
Okay.
Competitively for a little bit until I gracefully quit because I was scared and too tall.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. And then I played softball throughout almost all of high school and field hockey in high school and in college.
Okay.
So
I love that. What was your biggest fandom sport, like when you were growing up watching?
So I loved basketball when Michael Jordan was in the NBA. He was one of my idols.
Heard of him.
Yeah. And I loved football. Fun fact. In 4th grade, still have my yearbook from 4th grade. And when they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up, I said I wanted to be the first female football player for the New York Giants.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably because I was obsessed with Icebox from the Little Giants, but
yes. Yeah. We talk a little bit about how your role pertains to the regular season as well, but there's so much that goes in the world of NFL in the offseason, right? I mean, we just wrapped up with the Super Bowl. What a spectacle. Congratulations to the Chiefs on that one. But now it's the pre-draft process. Now we've got the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. When you look at the Combine and what that does and brings essentially the whole league together in Indianapolis, what goes into planning that?
So for us specifically, there really is no off season. We like to call it the non-football season.
Yeah.
And it really starts sort of this cyclical process for us specifically on planning for next season. So right after Super Bowl, we start thinking through what our plans are for competition committee planning and what we want to bring to the table in terms of any changes, modifications, anything new coming online. And so we're prepping for that. We have those meetings at the Combine. We also meet with the Video Directors Committee at the Combine. And all of the video directors, again, sort of talking about recapping the season, what new things we want to see on the horizon, what we want to put in front of the competition committee. Again, we meet with we have an informal group that we call our Game Ops admin group. And so it's, varying departments across the clubs, but mostly on the football side, whether it's football administration, team travel, football operations, to try and hit on some of those groups that we maybe don't talk to all the time throughout the season, but to try and get some feedback from them as well as we start, again, looking ahead to planning for all of the meetings that are going to take place before the start of the next season.
Yeah.
So for us at Combine, we're meeting with those groups, we're meeting with the competition committee, and then we'll do our greater football ops department puts on the women's forum there.
Okay.
And then I'll do a roundtable session with them.
And for, fans and listeners, what is the Women's Forum?
So the Women's Forum is a program that's run through our football strategy group and pipeline development group. They are bringing in women from college, high school football, other sort of similar industries, and give them an opportunity to come in and learn more about women in the NFL, what opportunities there are, sort of a networking event. So they do a number of different programming pieces. Jane Goodell will speak to the group. There'll be a number of coaches that come and speak to them. There's league executives that'll also speak with them. And then there's a networking component sort of helping them get to know who the right people are as they look to progress either to the NFL or to a club.
And that's just great to see, more opportunities, more representation, more women helping women and stuff. Especially, I'd imagine in your 16 seasons there, you've seen so many more women in this league than when you started.
For sure. In our department specifically, our senior leadership team has 3 SVPs on our leadership team. So there are a lot of females in our specifically in football operations. There are a number of women in our department. Maybe it wasn't always that way.
Yeah.
But even in game operations, we have 4 or 5 full-time women in our group. So yeah, it's constantly evolving, and there's a lot of women that work in operations.
And ideally, we'll get to the place where we aren't counting how many women are there. That's just, wow, there's a lot of talented people in this department.
Correct.
And I think it's, evolving and growing towards that way. But when you look at some of the younger generations coming up who might want to do something similar to what you do, or maybe even back to your younger self, what advice would you give to, 22-year-old Stephanie applying for this job in the first place?
I definitely need more advice than the 22-year-olds today. Really? I can tell you that. I was not prepared. But the advice I would give to them and to my former self is to get involved now.
Yeah.
Things that you can do today to help you for later on, whether that's high school football, college football, other college sports, looking at other leagues. Start building relationships today. Don't just set your sights on the NFL, because everyone's path is going to be different. Timing's going to be different for everybody. The opportunities are hard. That it's tough to get an opportunity in the NFL all the time. So anything you can do today to start meeting people. You never know who's going to end up being in a position of, has an open position, ends up in the NFL, ends up at a club. You never know. So, putting in the time and the dedication and having a passion for the game and meeting those people today will help you down the line. I worked in the ticket office, but I didn't do anything at, my college didn't have football anyway, but I was playing a sport, but I didn't necessarily volunteer and do game operations for basketball or something like that, gives you sort of that exposure at a time where there's less pressure and you can volunteer your time or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think that is really important. And the other thing that I like to share with anyone that wants to talk to me, I usually am very transparent and honest with them, but I always tell them it's not just a career, it's a lifestyle.
Yes.
You have to want to do this all the time. Mm-hmm. There's non-traditional working hours. You're working weekends, you're working holidays, you're missing out on opportunities to hang out with friends. I'd say I barely have friends outside my office at this point. It is a true commitment. And if you don't truly have passion for the sport or operations or something else within the field, that'll come through, because you truly have to have the dedication and the commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 role, because, football is always happening, even in non-football season, as you call it, as well. And I do like the perspective too. Life is long. People always say life is short, but life is long, and you never know when you're going to reconnect with people that you've known and met along the way. So great advice for the next generation coming up, but also, thank you for sharing your story here and your journey, and wishing you continued success in this role. And Stephanie Durante, the VP of Game Operations for the NFL, joins us on this episode of Her Playbook, brought to you by CCNY, doing remarkable things. Learn more at ccny.cuny.edu. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time. I'm Madeline Burke. We'll see you next time.
You deserve to treat yourself. So turn your tax refund into a U fund and give yourself a Straight Talk Wireless Extended Silver Unlimited plan and get a new Samsung Galaxy A14 on them. You can get a great everyday value on wireless with Straight Talk's Unlimited plan starting at $25 a line per month for 4 lines. You'll save so much you'll be enjoying that refund all year long. It's the refund that keeps on refunding. Find Straight Talk at straighttalk.com or at your local Walmart store. Taxes and fees not included. Offer valid through 4/14/24 while supplies last. Online only. Must purchase a Straight Talk Extended Silver Unlimited plan to qualify. Limit of 5 phones per customer. Family plan discount with 4 lines, all on the Silver Unlimited plan. Not combinable with autopay discount.
All-inclusive vacations make life easy with endless eats, bottomless drinks, and never-ending fun. So booking an all-inclusive vacation should be easy too, right? That's where Apple Vacations comes in. Book your all-inclusive getaway with Apple Vacations and receive exclusive perks at select resorts. You'll find the best deals at Riu Hotels and Resorts in Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central America, and enjoy a selection of exclusive nonstop vacation flights. Turn on easy mode at applevacations.com or call your local travel advisor to get started. Visit applevacations.com or call your local travel advisor to get started.